Welcome to Inclusive Cyber, your front row seat to understand how a diverse mix of voices is not just necessary, but essential to protect our most sensitive computer networks and personal data. I'm your host, Danny Magallanes, and through my podcast, we shine the spotlight on the heroes and trailblazers from every corner of society who are redefining the diversity, equity, and inclusion frontier. Every episode is a step towards a cyber community that's as varied as it is united, where everyone has the keys to unlock their potential and the power to protect our digital world. Join us on this journey where every listen, every share, every dialogue inches us closer to this new reality. Welcome to this week's Growth Mindset episode. For those who did not watch or listen to the previous one, it's just about trying to identify stories based on different themes or buckets to look at growth mindsets we can learn from our environment and make us better practitioners, whether it's in cybersecurity, IT, or whatever our profession is. I might be talking with a list. I'm wearing my retainer. For those that aren't familiar, I had a tooth pulled, so doing that. But more casual setting, I have my yerba mate, again, hopefully sponsors of this show in the future. Two different things I wanted to point out. I have a better camera, so now you see all the probably imperfections. So playing around with better equipment. Now the background should be blurry. And then I'm also going to start sharing some documents. So then my screen will start shrinking up. I'll be in the corner. I don't know which corner I'm going to toss my picture at, but then talk about, in this case, 3 different stories that I want to bring to everyone. And then I'll wrap it up with different books that I've been reading that have been resonating with me. So with that being said, let me go ahead and share the first article. So this one is all about nurturing innovation, and it comes from the Harvard Business Review. And all 3 of these articles come from Harvard Business Review. I just recently got a subscription, probably late last year, and just been consuming a lot of their content. I really love what the business perspective, innovation, DEI that Harvard brings to the table. So in this one about nurturing innovation, looking at cross-collaboration and open innovation, businesses continue to grapple with the challenge of translating ideas into more impactful resources and solutions while also advocating more novel ideas and diverse participation. But I think where companies potentially might get tripped up, they have a lot of great brainstorming sessions. So they bring a lot of people, hey, let's put notes on the whiteboard, divide it up into different buckets. But I think for the most part, that's where the ideas shine, but then there's no strategic planning on what to do with all that information collected. Organizers focus on idea collisions without considering that long-term planning, as I mentioned. But true innovation involves a collaborative journey, not just multitude of ideas. So some of the key bullet points on this article, they talk about idea overload. So despite numerous initiatives, businesses struggle with all of these ideas, but then how do you, for the lack of a better term, operationalize them? The other thing is diverse participation. Calls for involving diverse voices are valid, but it's not solely about generating new ideas. The hackathon pitfall. Accelerated innovation events often fizzle out after brainstorming due to inadequate long-term planning. Collaborative journey. Innovation isn't just about the ideas, but the journey on how to, again, operationalize all this information. Then we look at the curated process. Research supports the role of intermediaries to spark that thought process and bring everybody to the table and kind of maintain that collaboration. And then 21st century business competitive advantage now hinges on collaborative advantage. So innovation, that's a very key topic for businesses nowadays. As an example, generative artificial intelligence, right? That's technology that I would argue if you're a large corporation, if you're not looking at that to see how it can give you more that competitive advantage, or even looking at new innovative ways to make your current processes more efficient, then you're going to be already behind the curve. I really like this story just because about innovation, not only with technology, but it could be innovation with processes as well. That it's not only about generating ideas, but then what you do after you generate all those ideas. So the next article is about 8 essential qualities of successful leaders. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing here. When we look at leadership, certain skill sets typically come up. It's about communication, planning, problem solving, and maybe delegation as being key components of leadership. But then there's always that X factor that separates the great from the incredible leaders, if that makes sense. According to Harvard Business School professor Linda Hill, leadership expert, argues that exceptional leaders are made and not born. I definitely agree with this, and I'll get to some of my leadership experiences, both on the receiving end and being part of leadership. One other thing that we want to talk about is they emerge from intentionally navigating through challenging situations, foster self-development, and cultivate a range of critical qualities. Some of the qualities that this article talks about, 8 of them. But before that, I just want to give everyone a background of my experiences with leaders or managers as a whole throughout my entire career before the military, and that was way back when, and what I've always thought a leader should do and should be. When it comes to leadership, I always thought, just similar to what this Harvard professor mentioned, leaders are not born. It's not an intrinsic quality that they come out into the world, into the workforce, and just start leading and doing a good job at that. Maybe certain traits like charisma and being introvert gives them that additional edge. But I've seen a lot of introvert leaders be super exceptional. It's going to vary. My experience, I saw, completely the gambit from both sides of the spectrum and everything in the middle. But for me, it's about probably humility and empathy, my personal leadership philosophy. And I'll give you an example. I remember when I was in government, a leader that I respected asked me, "Hey, when are you going to put in and throw your hat in the ring?" And my response was, "I'm not ready." And he's like, "Well, what do you mean you're not ready? What else do you need to do?" And I told him that for me, a leader needs to be the person that knows everything. And granted, that was a very myopic way of looking at leadership, but that was my frame of reference or mindset during that time, that leaders needed to provide all the information for their people for them to be successful. I didn't want to be a roadblock or detriment to the people that I wanted to lead in their careers. So I said, no, I'm not ready because I still need to learn a lot of different things about the organization. And they're listening and they say, "Well, that's very admirable, but do you think any of these other people are thinking that way?" And he said, "Probably not. So put in." Long story short, I never ended up putting in for any leadership position within that organization until later. But let's go over some of the 8 essential qualities according to Harvard. So authenticity. It's essential for that trust in building that inspiration for your team. Moving on to the next one. I've talked about this ad nauseum. Curiosity. I think this is something that we're lacking not only in IT or cybersecurity. This involves exploring uncharted territories and understanding broader contexts, and then nurture by embracing new experiences and asking expansive questions. The next one, analytical prowess, required for addressing complex problems with innovative solutions. And then with big data, developed through attention to data, understanding its implications, and seeking out potential biases. So in my wheelhouse when it comes to intelligence. Other 5, we talked about adaptability, vital for responding to the fast changing world and evolving stakeholder expectations. Creativity is another thing that's, I think, sorely lacking. The book review, or some of the books that I'm going to be talking about, is focused on that creativity or lack thereof. Comfort with ambiguity. This, I think, is really, really big. Dr. Bertoni, I forgot what episode it was. She talked about navigating ambiguity and thriving in that environment. She used the term professionally fearless, which I really like that term, because no matter what business, what organization you end up at, it's about accepting that there is going to be ambiguity. There's going to be uncertainty. You're not going to have all the answers. And even the leaders there might not have all the answers, but that's okay, because you, being creative and curious, are going to be able to adapt. But a lot of people that I've met throughout my life, it scares them to death when there is ambiguity. And only a little bit. So I can't even imagine if there's a lot of ambiguity. Then the last two, it's about resilience, that grit, and empathy, like I mentioned before. It's crucial for building that trust and understanding within the people that you want to inspire and ultimately lead. There's a lot of leaders that might not meet the metrics for whatever reason. I've been talking to a lot of people, and they've been talking about their bosses, right? And it's not to vent just because they're venting. They're bringing up legitimate things. And they're also they're being accountable for some of the things that they didn't do as well. So it's not only about venting. There is that disconnect, that at least with the people that I've been speaking to. Moving on, I think this one was extremely appropriate. Again, talking to a lot of people in and out of cyber, and people are struggling. Kind of ironic that cybersecurity allegedly has 700,000 open vacancies here in the US alone, but I'm talking to people and they cannot find jobs in cybersecurity. And this runs the entire gambit, from leaders, executive leaders, that want to try something new, something different, to middle management, and all the way to the entry-level positions. I wanted to share, again, according to Harvard Business Review, and the cool thing, I'll make sure to put in the show notes, or do this thing like everybody does, put the video. There's a video for this particular article about the 38 smart questions to ask in a job interview. So one thing that I really wanted to convey here, when you're in an interview or looking for another job, it shouldn't be a one-way street. It's not about whether the company thinks you fit them, but it's got to be a symbiotic relationship, right? Not only does a company have to ascertain whether or not you'll be a good fit, first, whether you're a good fit to address their gap, and then would be the culture. From an employee standpoint, you want to make sure the culture is something that you can thrive in. It just kind of reminded me of an interview. This is several years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago. It said, describe the best working environment, or an environment where you excel. And I'm like, oh man, it's all about a team and collaborating and working with the other teams. I felt good about my answer. And it turns out this position, you're by yourself and you have to do everything on your own and find everything on your own. And then with that, I didn't get the position because, and even if they offered it, could I have done it? Maybe. But I already conveyed to them that my best environment where I can excel is in a collaborative environment. The reason I bring that up, as employees, you want to make sure that the company, you believe in their products and services. That's one. And two, that the culture, you can ask questions about the culture and different policies that you care. In this article, it talks about focusing on two goals. Assessing the organization that it aligns with your career aspirations and personal views, and then demonstrating that fit. Continuously prove you're the right candidate by reinforcing the qualifications and fit for the role. You want to personalize the questions. Tailor your questions to reflect your personal interest in the role and overall organization. Asking personalized questions helps the interview visualize you in the position, creating a lasting impression. Sample questions that I just wanted to talk to you about. And again, the video would probably have more details there. Questions about the specific job is one bucket. What's the performance review process like here? How often would I be formally reviewed? And this is something that historically I've always used and asked. You want to ask about the team. What type of skills is a team missing that you're looking to fill with a new hire or with me trying to fill that out? Then other things for your potential boss. How long have you been with the company? What's your favorite part of working here? Not trying to trick them or put them into a corner, but do they like what they're doing? Are they potentially out one foot in, one foot out? The last thing that you want to do is you connect with this manager, and then by the time you get hired or within a short period of time, they're out the door. And then asking about the company. Here, you can ask what gets you most excited about the company's future? How has the company changed over the last years, depending on how long that leader or the person interviewing has been with? In culture, how do you typically onboard employees? What do new employees typically find surprising after they start? That's kind of interesting. Then professional development is another thing that you want to ask for. Training. What learning and development opportunities will I have in this particular role? And that's something that I've used historically as well. You want to know, do they have a training budget? And if you're in a very technical field, if they don't have a training budget, then you're probably going to have to do a lot of open source research or potentially out-of-pocket expenses to really understand that role. And then one last point on this is, are there examples of career path beginning with this position? Right? I think historically, at least where I've been, that career path has been murky. There hasn't been anything set in stone, which is good. You want to make sure that you're agile, but at the same time, what are you conveying to potential prospective employees? That there isn't a path. And if there isn't a path, then the way they're going to interpret that is going to be a little bit harder to go through there. I'll make sure to put that link up for this particular video on YouTube so you can get all the 38 questions and not just a handful that I selected. So now in closing here, we're at 23 minutes. Hopefully I'm able to edit this a little bit more and get it under 20 minutes. Just some of the books that I've been reading. The first one, Creativity Inc. This is just an amazing book. I did a quick LinkedIn post about my review on this book. Just so many nuggets of information. It's a 10-year-old book. One thing that I always liked about this, or two things, is being creative, right? Understanding how people in a particular industry, how they've been super successful. How did they handle creativity or innovation? And then the other thing, I love Pixar. I grew up with Pixar. Remember the original one back in 1995, Toy Story. It blew everyone away at the time. It's written by Ed Catmull. He is the CEO and co-founder of Pixar. It talks about history a little bit, but then it's at the heart, it's a leadership book. It's a business book on some of the things that they've implemented while developing Pixar. Some things worked, some things didn't. They were not afraid to try different things, right? And if it didn't work, they didn't put the blame on anybody within their particular teams, right? It's about, hey, okay, well, can we save this? Is there any way to change it up a little bit and use it? If not, let's move on to the next thing. One other aspect about this particular book, it's about building a brain trust. So you would have a handful of individuals, both at the lower echelons of the company, all the way to the executives, and provide feedback on other movies. And that's where egos were left behind. The directors would come and say, hey, this is technically my baby. The brain trust would provide feedback. It's not attacking the person or the director, but it's attacking the idea and overall film in this particular case. So overall, just amazing book. Next book, Leave the World Behind by Ruman Alam. I already saw the Netflix movie on this, but it talks about cybersecurity in this case, that there is an event, let's just put it that way. It just gets you thinking on hyperbolic terms that historically have been associated with cybersecurity, cyber Pearl Harbor or cyber 9/11 event type of thing. Good book. I'm in the middle of that. The other one is Peter Stork, compromise. I've had this for a long time. The reason I got this, it's obviously comes from my FBI days. It's called Compromise, Counterintelligence, and the Threat of Donald J. Trump. I never had the opportunity to work with Peter at the FBI. He was primarily in the field office and then doing counterintelligence. When I was in the Bureau, I was doing counterterrorism, director of intelligence and cyber. I know we have an election coming up this year. And at the end of the day, it's just about being vigilant with what we consume on social media. I was trying to find my phone, but I can't find it. And then the other book that I just recently got, I haven't read, but I love the author, Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. She wrote Mexican Gothic, La Hacienda, and very trippy books. Let's just put it that way. And I'm sure this one is going to be along the same lines there. One last book here, and it's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And the best way to describe this book, I've read it once. I don't think I really comprehended it the first time. And now I tend to do a lot of highlights. That's the way I read and try to understand this book. But it's an inquiry into values. I read this when I was back in school at National Intel University, and I really liked this book and at least the way the professor conveyed it there. Anyway, with that, hope you all enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Leave comments, give me feedback. Is this good? Any recommendations? If you're interested in being in the podcast, hit me up. I'd love to hear from you. And it doesn't have to be, if you're outside of cybersecurity, IT, probably even better. You're going to bring a fresh new perspective that we can hopefully bring into this profession and ultimately make it better. So with that being said, hope you enjoy the rest of your week. And until next time, bye.